This summer we took a 10-day trip to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee and back. We started in Scotia, New York, which is home for us, and did the entire journey by car. The first leg of our journey was from Scotia to Hershey PA. We had some route options and decided on Route 88, which is toll-free. 88 has some pretty views of rolling hills and the spectacular flag that flies high above the highway. It wasn't long before we were in Pennsylvania. Our first stop, the rest area. The plan for Hershey wasn't Hershey Park, as neither of us are big fans of roller coasters, but we wanted to experience the other things at Hershey. This photo op was right outside of Hershey World on the walk in from the parking lot. Hershey World offers several fun activities. One is a small ride that shows how their products are made. There is also a short 4D movie complete with glasses where the audience solves a mystery. In addition to shopping for products that are all things Hershey, you can catch a trolley that takes you through the area and highlights historic sites, from the old factory to the orphanage that Hershey and his wife founded. And you get a chocolate at the end of it. From there, we headed to Lancaster Brewing Company, which was close to our hotel in Harrisburg. They have typical pub offerings such as salads and burgers, and are very yummy. I suggest the strawberry wheat beer. Perfect blend of sweet and bitter. Quite refreshing after a long day and a belly full of Hershey bars. Our second day took us from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to the historic George Washington Hotel in Winchester, Virginia. After breakfast, we drove through Harrisburg and enjoyed the historic city. We walked along the waterfront and looked at old houses, and checked out other sites along the water. At 10 a.m., the National Civil War Museum opens, and we were the first ones through the door. That's a first. We didn't take very many pictures, but the museum was very comprehensive. After the Civil War Museum, we headed to Harper's Ferry in West Virginia. Here is the gorgeous convergence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers. Once at the national park, you pay a fee to park and then ride the shuttle to the attractions. You can park in town if you prefer, but it is hard to find parking. Don't forget your mask though if you're going to use the shuttle bus. Historic Harper's Ferry has little shops you can poke your head into. Some have real stores and others are set up as museums. Trains run through here, and you can walk a path along the tracks to the intersection of the Appalachian Trail. The historic building, which is the site of John Brown's raid, has been moved a few feet away, but this monument marks the exact spot. There are some gorgeous views of the river here. Sometimes you'll see tubers floating along on the river below. On the way out, we got to enjoy some of the fauna of the park. From Harper's Ferry, we headed to Winchester, Virginia. Old Town Winchester has a small pedestrian mall with shopping and dining. There wasn't a lot open on the Monday night that we were there, but we did manage to get a pretty yummy dinner. This firehouse in Winchester has a pretty cool looking weather vane. At closer look, you'll see that he's a little fireman. The historic George Washington Hotel was built in 1924, but had been updated to modern luxury. It's walking distance to the pedestrian mall and about an hour to the entrance station of Shenandoah National Park. The parking garage at the George Washington Hotel had these spectacular views of the town. On day 3, we headed to Dickey Ridge Visitor Center, which is the north entrance to the Shenandoah National Park. Here we paid for an entrance pass that allowed us to enter and exit the park as often as we wanted over 3 days. The views were pretty spectacular right away. Every few miles there is a pull-off that you can pull into to admire the scenery and take pictures. The road that winds through the park is called Skyline Drive. It runs 105 miles and was primarily built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. Mike saw someone climbing these rocks, and of course he had to climb them also. About halfway through the park, we exited and headed to the town of Luray. Luray Caverns boasts of the East Coast's largest cavern. Luray Caverns is a national landmark and is definitely the largest cavern I have ever been in. Unlike other cavern tours I've been on, this one is self-guided. You can take as long as you want taking pictures without the worry of missing something important from the tour guide. These flow are among the largest in the world. An underground organ uses stalactites to create notes using tiny hammers. This underground pool is the site of a wishing well. Luray Caverns collects the money donated every year, which is often several feet deep, and donates the money to various charities each year. Eggs, anyone? In addition to the caverns, your ticket also grants you access to a car museum. I was excited to see this Pierce Arrow car. I've only seen one at the Pierce Arrow Museum in Buffalo. Once done with the caverns, we headed back to Skyline Drive. We showed our pass at the gate and were granted passage. Mary's Rock is a tunnel through a rock. There are lots of warnings about motorhome heights and making sure you can fit through here. Even in weather, the views are unparalleled. Mike saw this little friend crossing the road and stopped to take a picture. We continued on until we completed all 105 miles of the parkway. We were sad to leave such beauty, but grateful for the beautiful day and all that we had seen. Day 4 was the last leg to Pigeon Forge. It was mostly highway driving. We were so glad to finally see the Welcome to Tennessee sign. We checked into the hotel first and then decided to explore the town. The Jurassic Jungle Cruise was not worth the money per person for the 5-minute ride, but it was a really fun amusement ride. The animatronics were pretty cool. After the Jungle Cruise, we went for a drive in the Smoky Mountains, trying to find a waterfall trail that we had heard about, but we took the wrong path. We still had a good time and got to see a little cabin in the woods. Dinner that night was at Dolly Parton's Stampede Dinner Show. Wagons, horses, stunts, and a pretty delicious game hen for dinner might explain the claim of being the most visited dinner theater in the world. The island is a little shopping area with some amusement rides that we visited earlier in the day but didn't take any pictures of. At night, it's all lit up and quite pretty. After the Stampede, we stopped at the Hollywood Wax Museum. They advertised being open late and it was a great stop after dinner. We were the only ones there and we didn't have to elbow our way in for pictures. What a fun way to end the evening. The next day, I had to stay close to my computer for a work meeting and a grad class. We started the day at the Smoky Mountains Alpine Coaster, but cameras weren't allowed on the ride. Then we went for a ride through the Smoky Mountains in the car. We found the waterfall that we hadn't been able to find the day before. Then we drove along the scenic drive, very similar to Skyline Drive, with pull-offs. Newfound Gap is a tourist destination. Not only are the views great, but the point is on the Tennessee and North Carolina border. Most places you visit in the area cross paths with the Appalachian Trail. A sign in the parking lot denotes the state line. Look, Ma, I'm in 2 states at the same time! Sometimes after a long road trip, you just want your spouse to be in another state. Just kidding. Our next stop was Clingman's Dome, which boasts the highest point in the Great Smoky Mountains. The half-mile walk to the top is very steep. The views are great, even when cloudy. The winding roads in the Great Smoky Mountains reminded us of the roads in Acadia. We had an early dinner and headed back to the hotel for my grad class. Last one for the semester. Woohoo! Friday morning, we checked out of our hotel and headed to Dollywood. Not far from the entrance, you can check out Dolly's motorhome, or Home on Wheels. Right next to that is a museum highlighting important events in Dolly's life. I, of course, love anything to do with her imagination library. A highlight of the park is the coal-powered train that brings you up the hill for a view of the mountains. We laughed when the conductor said a cinder in the eye isn't a medical emergency, but we really were covered with coal by the end. There's lots of great photo ops throughout the park. Look at this silly hatchling. After Dollywood, we headed back over the North Carolina line toward Asheville for the evening. In the morning, we headed to Biltmore, which I had seen on a Travel Channel show the day before we left on our trip. Biltmore claims to be the largest private home in the country. The spectacular estate is a small fraction of what it used to be, but it still is magnificent. Each room is more stunning than the last. The amount of detail in the building outside was just as amazing as the interior. The gardens are vast, with sections for each season. Grapes grown on site are used for the winery, which is world-renowned. The conservatory houses beautiful orchids and a model train set. After Biltmore, we ended up on the Blue Ridge Parkway, another mountainous drive complete with tunnels and bridges. The views were amazing. Craigie Gardens is a popular pull-off because it has a little camp store and a great view. Our end goal of this leg was Mount Mitchell, which is the highest peak east of the Mississippi. Even from the entrance, it is quite a drive up. And just as we got to the parking lot, the sky completely opened up. Finally, we put our raincoats on and decided to go for it. We were the only ones on the trail and enjoyed the top for a few minutes alone. At the base of the observation deck is the burial site of Elisha Mitchell, the professor the mountain is named for. The rest of the trip we stopped at pull-offs and took pictures or pulled in quick and admired the view and kept driving. At one point, the fog became so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet in front of you, and sometimes it looked like we were going to drive off a cliff. We stopped at a lake and could barely see it inches from us. We started making our way toward home. But first, a pit stop at Appomattox Courthouse, where the treaty to end the American Civil War was signed. Here, a little village is preserved to look as it was in 1865. Inside the courthouse is a museum, complete with a short video. The self-guided tour of the grounds is free, and you can poke your head into many of the buildings. One of the must-do places is Mike's American in Springfield, Virginia. Even though it was a bit out of the way and a long drive from Appomattox Courthouse, look how happy this stop made me. Mike worked in this area for a while several years ago, and this was my favorite place to eat. Look at how perfectly these steaks are cooked. We spent the night at the nearby Wingate. The next morning, we moved our car to a more northern metro stop in Maryland. We were disappointed by the visit to the Air and Space Museum and found that the entire second floor was closed, with only a portion of the first floor open. Most of the other Smithsonian museums were closed as well, such as the African American History Museum, which was under construction the last time we were here, and the Museum of the American Indian, which I had done, but Mike hadn't. We walked them all and enjoyed the sights from the outside. The Washington Monument disappointed me again. Last time I was here, it was being repaired due to earthquake damage. This time, tickets had to be selected days in advance and weren't available for many days out. One of these days, I will go inside. We enjoyed a sculpture garden and had lunch in the nearby cafe. Then back to the metro to head north and meet our friend Dave. We met Dave for bowling at a mall near his house in Columbia, Maryland. We got this one picture of the three of us before grabbing dinner and catching up. After dinner, we headed into Pennsylvania and back toward the start of our journey. We headed to Strasburg for the evening, which is near Hershey. The last day of our trip, we started the morning at the Strasburg Railroad. This was a favorite of Mike's, who had lots of childhood memories here. The scenic train ride takes you 45 minutes through Amish country, where you can enjoy wildflowers and farms. A few times a year they have Thomas the Tank Engine, and I noticed this platform 9 3/4 for Harry Potter fans. After the train ride, we drove through the city of Strasburg with the intent of having lunch at the famous Central Market, but apparently they stopped serving lunch at a certain time. Instead, we ate at the nearby C'est La Vie Cafe, and I highly recommend it. After lunch, we hit the road, headed for home, and saw highway marker 0 for Route 87. As we entered New York, the bird poop on the window interfered with the picture. But with the politics in New York currently, we figured this was a fitting welcome back to the state. It was such a wonderful trip, but I slept like a rock in my own bed that night. Thanks for joining us on this trip. Until next time.